Dear participants and dear colleagues, I would like to welcome you to our research project webinar Shepherd UAS Standards, which is the final dissemination event of this project. My name is Willi Siegel and I act as moderator for today's webinar. I'm an employee of the European Union Aviation Safety Agency and I'm very delighted to be with you here all. Now, for the start, let me mention, please, some contextual information before we start with our webinar. If you please can go to the next slide, and again to the next slide, because this is just a disclaimer. So this webinar, as already said, is the final dissemination event of our research project, and the research project as such received funding from the European Union's Horizon Europe Research and Innovation Program. So that's the largest research program which we operate in the European Union. This Horizon Europe Work Program has a number of actions, and there are some actions which have been delegated to EASA. And these are in particular actions where we are dealing with environment, or where we deal with authority research needs, and our research project today, Shepherd, is one of those. So under such research project, the EASA is acting as the contractor as well as is doing the technical guidance, but we are not doing the research action by ourselves. We have public tenders with which we try to find the best suitable consortium to do such a research project. And in this research project, I can tell you, we found an excellent consortium. This consortium is led by Deep Blue and managed this project in the last 2 years. Last word, EASA has a number of such projects. So currently we have a portfolio of 37 projects. As already said, they are dealing with authority research needs. And it's very important for us because such research projects will empower us or enable us that we do our core tasks such as rulemaking, oversight, and certification. Now, let me at this stage, please now introduce you the speakers of today. To my left, which is probably on your screen to the right, is my colleague Natale Di Rubo. He is working in the drones program as a drone project manager. And my colleague Natale acted in this project as the technical lead on the EASA side. Then on the left from Natale is our colleague Marco Tucci. Marco is employed by Deep Blue, is their program manager. And in this specific project, Marco was acting as the technical lead of the whole consortium. As the project manager of the whole consortium. And then on my side here is Alexandra Florin, who is employed by Wing and is a member. Wing is a member of the consortium, and Alexandra acted as the technical lead of this consortium. Alexandra is employed by Wing as the European lead on regulatory affairs and on standards. So now we please have a look on the agenda. We did the welcome, so that was my part. The next one is that my colleague Natale will give you a short introduction on the research scope and why EASA actually asked for this research action and what were the objectives. Then we move on with Marco, who will give an overview of the project implementations and the key results. And then there will be a particular also Alexandra, who will say more about how the methodology was done and what kind of results you have developed under this quite amazing project. We move then back to Natale, who will then say what the EASA will do with this quite important research results. So how will you all benefit from these results also in the future? Then it's your time, colleagues. We move then to the questions and answers part. And for that, you will see we will use Slido. Slido is already active, so you can then already draft your questions actually during the presentations. You don't have to wait for the question and answer slot. Yeah, and through Slido, you have also the possibility actually to vote up some questions. We will then go along the questions as they are ranked on Slido. I will moderate this. My colleagues will be so happy and provide the answer. And at the end, we will just conclude with some concluding remarks. Colleagues, let me also please say the following. We record this webinar, and we will publish the recorded webinar as quickly as possible, I hope, actually by tomorrow. Good. Having said that, I would say we start, and I would like to hand over now to my colleague, Natale.
We will give some seconds to...
Yeah, so Slido, colleagues, as already said, you can also use Slido, please, directly in WebEx. Yeah, you will find that there's Slido, and you can already put the other questions. Otherwise, you can also use your mobile phone or your desktop, and you can through this Slido.com slide, you will see here also the event code, or you scan this here. But it's also part in the events page. So now it's yours.
Okay. Thank you, Willy. Good morning. So the European Commission and the EASA has been committed since several years now to support the drone market, to establish some economy of scale, and to allow operation in Europe. So the drone regulation was published in 2019, became applicable end of 2020. And when we published the drone regulation, there were already a number of standards that actually were available. So we are trying to find a way to help operators in order to be compliant with the drone regulations. When we talk about to be compliant, we consider all possible requirements that are in the regulation. So how to conduct a risk assessment, for example, and how to be compliant with all the elements of the SORA. You know, there is several operational safety objectives that are related to operation, to pilot training, to design of the drone, and design of the drone. We have also the requirements coming from the special condition like UAS, and also regarding the use space. So our aim was to identify which of the standards that are today already available may be used by drone operator in order to demonstrate compliance with the different elements of the regulation. So there was a project that in reality started since several years. The Commission and the EASA established in 2017 the European Standardization Coordination Group, where there is a forum where the European Commission, EASA, plus all the main entities that in Europe are interested in drone activity. So, for example, we have Eurocontrol, we have CESAR. They meet together with the operator, and we have representation of Association of Operator Manufacturer, and with standardization bodies like EuroCAE, like STM, like SAE, like ISO, like all the other that are working on this domain, in order to identify what are the standards that are already available, what are the gaps, and how we can coordinate the development of additional standards in order to fill those gaps. So what the ESG did in 2019 was to publish what is called Rollout Development Plan. That is a list of standards that may be applicable to drones, standards coming from different domains. For example, there are standards that were developed for the automotive industry that may also be feasible for drones, for example, standard developed for the aviation, that we need to understand how proportionate may be for the small drone. So what the USCG did was to compile this list to have an overview of all the standard developed, not only in Europe, but also outside of Europe, and in particular to the United States. Then the Commission funded a project that is called AW Drone Project, and you can find here a link where you can access to a portal that was developed by this project, where those standards were assessed in order to identify if, first of all, which standard could be considered suitable for some of the requirements of the regulation. Suitable in terms of coverage, in terms of proportionality. However, this consortium that was established at the time was not also assessing the technical content of the standard. So what they did, they identified a list of standards that potentially may be considered acceptable as means of compliance for the different elements of the regulation. What then we found as EASA was the last piece then of the puzzle, that is the Shepherd project. So they took the list of standards that were proposed by AW Drones, and they did a technical assessment in order to verify if this standard may be suggested to EASA to be considered as an acceptable means of compliance. So this is what we did. So this was the scope of the 2 years project that now will be presented by Marco. So this is how the project started. Now we can see what are the results.
Yeah, thank you very much, Natale. It's a real pleasure to be here today presenting the results of the Shepherd project. And I have to say, it feels like the end of a long journey for me. I still remember when all this started in AW Drones in 2019. And at the time, we identified more than 600 standards to be potentially suitable to comply with regulatory requirements. And then we went down to around 60, and this was the number we started with in Shepherd. And this presentation really marks the end of a long process. And I can say that now we have a clear picture of what standards that are already published and available can be used to support demonstration of compliance to regulatory requirements, and which standards instead are not suitable or need to be complemented. So Willy kindly introduced me and Alexandra, but I'd like to mention here the exceptional team that I had the honor to coordinate during the last 2 years. So as mentioned, I acted as the project coordinator representing Deep Blue. And with me, I had the exceptional support from Alexandra Floren from Wing as the technical lead. And then the core team was completed by experts from Azure Drones, the UAS manufacturer, and by Michel Alouche, who is a well-known airworthiness certification expert in the US domain. And then the project team relied also on other experts coming from the German Aerospace Research Center, DLR, from Volocopter, from ARRA Technologies with their expertise on U-Space, and from consultancy companies like Murzilli Consulting and Euro-USC Italia. So we assembled this team in order to have at least 2 experts dealing with each of the domains that we were supposed to address. And these domains ranged from airworthiness, initial and continuing, to U-Space, operations, training. So we had a lot of different topics to consider. And all the experts that were part of this project were pre-approved by EASA to make sure that the competencies that were required to carry out this work were always available. In addition, we established also a stakeholders consultation group, which was composed by experts coming from standard design organizations like EuroCAE, ASTM, and ASDSTAN, from relevant associations in the UAS and UIM domain like GUTMA and JEDA, and from authorities like the Australian Civil Aviation Authority, CASA, and international organizations like Eurocontrol. So the role of these external experts was to help us in reviewing the project results and provide feedback before the final results were published, in order to help us steering the work and especially for standard design organization, make sure that what Shepherd was doing was fully aligned with the ongoing standardization effort and that there was no duplication of effort in this area. Let me highlight that we noticed a significant interest about what we've been doing over the past 2 years from all over the world. And I mean, this is clear from the fact that the Australian Civil Aviation Authority asked to join the stakeholders consultation group, but we got requests from many people and many entities all over the world to be informed about what the project was doing. So this clearly shows that the impact of this project goes beyond Europe and that the need of identifying which standards can be used to demonstrate compliance is a shared need, because the requirements we use in Europe are somehow similar to the requirements that are applicable in other places in the world. And so I think we should be proud that EASA and the European Union took the lead on this, because this is a very important effort. So a few more words on the objectives of the project. First of all, we had to start by defining a methodology. And this was needed because with so many different experts involved, we needed a way to assess standards in an impartial, systematic and consistent way to make sure that the results were all aligned one with each other. And then, of course, we had the assessment process that had the objective to, on one hand, identify which standards or parts of those standards could be considered technically adequate to demonstrate compliance with a given requirement in the scope of the project, and which parts or entire standards instead could not be recommended for different reasons. To achieve these objectives, we structured the project in a quite simple way. So in the center here, you can see that we had one activity related to the development of the methodology, and then 2 activities that run in parallel for the assessment of the standards. So in principle, the identification of the adequate standards and the justification for those considered not acceptable were supposed to be 2 separate activities, but in practice, as you can easily understand, they are part of the same assessment process. So in the end, what you will see as the outcome of the project will be just one deliverable, including both the recommended standards and the justification for those that were instead excluded. And then, in addition to the technical work and the usual management activities, we had also some effort devoted to communicating and disseminating the outcomes of the project. And this was done by relying on traditional communication channels like LinkedIn or the project page on the EASA website, but also by presenting the project to conferences, events. So we went to the JERUS plenary, for example. We presented the project to a couple of ASTM meetings, just to name a few. The project has been running for 2 years. And the first activity was to develop the methodology, as I mentioned, which was published in September 2022 and is available on the project website, of course. And then we started the assessment phase. And the assessment was divided into 2 different blocks. In the first one, we assessed almost half of the standards in the scope of the project, and we focused on those that were considered with a higher priority. Because, for example, they were addressing potentially requirements for which there was a need from the industry to close an existing gap. So this first set of standards was first assessed by the project team, and then the results of the assessment were reviewed together with the external stakeholders and the EASA experts, and they were published at the end of April last year into one big deliverable that you can already find on the project website. The same process was repeated a second time for the second half of the standards, And again, the process went through a review with the EASA experts and the external stakeholders, which finished a few days ago. So we have just finalized this deliverable, and the last part of the results will be soon published on the project website as well. So just to conclude, as I mentioned, you can find all the information about the project and all the deliverables that are public on the dedicated webpage within the EASA website. So everything we are going to present today will be available in there. Something is already there, actually. So yeah, you can just go and check. So having said this, it's the time for the most interesting part, I think, of the webinar, so the methodology and the results. So I leave the floor to my colleague Alexandra for the next part. Thank you.
Thank you. Marco already presented what were the different steps of our work. One of the most crucial part was to agree how all those experts from the different companies would work together. So we really spent some time thinking about how to conduct the assessment, making sure that it's consistent, coherent, unbiased, and so on and so on. So we spent, as Marco mentioned, some time defining the methodology. I'm going to come back on this, but as well identifying which standards are in scope. We have, of course, used the work of airworthiness drones, but we thought it's important as well to look at the time. It was 2 years ago, but we were looking to the future, so we were looking at now what ASTM, UK were already working on. So we checked the roadmap. We anticipated which standard will be published by September last year in order to put it in scope. And so we started by establishing this list, which was reviewed in agreement with EASA, obviously, and in line with the work of AUSCG. Then one of the big work, once we had this list of standards, was to get an agreement against which requirements those standards will be assessed. Because obviously, if we start looking at all the SORA, all the use space, all the special condition like UAS, not all the standards are answering those requirements. So we have really worked and agreed with EASA in a very fine way which requirement needs to be looked at for each standard. So this was the first step. We were done by, as you mentioned, Marco, in September 2022 about. Then what we did, and it's part of the methodology, we realized that not all requirements are the same. I will come back on the different category. We arrived to different criteria to be used depending on the type of requirements. I will come back on this a bit later. And then a thing which was very important for us is to have always two companies making the assessment of one standard. So one leading company, obviously, but as well always a peer review by an independent expert from another company to make sure that everybody agrees. And obviously, EASA has been doing as well their work, putting some experts on the different standards. So there was an additional review, which triggered some good discussion. And so the final assessment is really the compilation of applying the methodology, having those reviews by independent experts from another company, but as well by EASA. And we are, I think we will be able to publish, or EASA will publish the final report probably at the end of the week, just to make the final adjustment on the format. Okay. So this was about the methodology. Next. I mentioned the requirements, the fact that there is a lot of requirements because, as already mentioned, we looked at the SORA requirements. For those familiar with the SORA, there are different types of requirements. There are the OSOs, operational safety objectives, the ground risk mitigation, for air risk mitigation, the tactical mitigation performance requirements, TMPRs, and the containment requirements. It is a lot of requirements. For those very familiar with the SORA, you know that even for the OZOs, we split between integrity and assurance requirements, and sometimes we have criteria. So we went to this level of details. The same for the special condition. Very often we decided to go at the paragraph level of one requirement, and the same on use space. So in total, we had a little bit more than 550 different requirements to consider among all this, again, because we went at a very fine level of details. We reviewed in total 47 standards. We decided, and this was discussed with the EASA, to only focus on published standards. So unfortunately, we were a little bit too optimistic at the beginning when we looked at the roadmap of the different SDOs, and some standards were far to be ready at the time we finalized the assessment. But we looked at 47 standards, and this is a good assessment of what's existing. I think Natalie mentioned the fact that we are going to present the result. What everybody needs to keep in mind is that most of those standards were published before any regulation was on the table, especially the UAS, the European regulation, the SORA, the U-Space, and so on. So you will, the last slide will present you statistics about how many are fully covering certain requirements, or partially, or not at all. I think it's factual. The situation was that many years ago, there was no regulation on the table. So SDOs did their best to develop those standards, but they are not always now. We realized during the assessment that many standards were actually at the level of the regulation. So they were anticipating the lack of regulation on the regulatory side. So we could not really consider those standards as MOC2 now published regulation, because it was too much at the same level. But at least, and obviously I'm co-sharing UK 105, I'm discussing with my colleague at ASN, there's a lot of SDOs, and this will be discussed in EU CG as well, which really wants to build from the results of this factual assessment to say, okay, what's missing, where are the gaps, and what needs to be done now by the SDOs. I'm going a little bit further. Sorry, I need to go back to the presentation. So I mentioned the categorization of requirements. Those who really want to dig into how we did the assessment, I think it's important to for you to be aware that part of the methodology, we decided to treat requirements in different way, and we have identified 3 big categories of requirements. There are obviously the European UAS regulation, the U-Space regulation is performance-based. So there is a lot of those requirements which are performance-based. Some are very technical, some are operational. So we have, thinking about which criteria to use, and I will detail the criteria, we decided to make a slight distinction between technical objective-based requirements or operational objective-based requirements. And then there are as well requirements which are technological dependent, everything which is related to C2, for instance, the communication and control and command, C2, command and control link. There's a lot of things which depends on the technology chosen by operators. So for this one, and you will see it in the result of the assessment, we have not stated whether one standard is better than the other. What we have done is a kind of mapping of the existing standards, summarizing what are the main characteristics of those different types of C2 link, for instance, what are the performance and so on, in order for operators to have an overview of what is existing, what could fit their CONOPS, and so on and so on. So for the technology-dependent standard, we have not done a traditional, but more a mapping in order to provide useful information for operators and understand which direction to take depending on what what the operator wants to do for their own operation. Next one. Yeah. So the assessment, I'm too old now. I need to look at my own screen. I can't read the slide. Almost. Yeah, I can read a bit if I concentrate. So I mentioned the methodology, and we wanted again to have a very consistent and fair treatment of all the standards. So what we did is that we defined some criteria. For those familiar with design assurance, they will recognize the terms completeness, correctness, as a standard or the paragraph of the standard completely addressing one requirement. Are they correctly addressing the requirement? We introduce the notion of proportionality and or interoperability for those standards. It's not always necessary, but for some standards, the interoperability, like for use space, for instance, is was key. And as well, we wanted to check, because we know that some standards can be challenging to implement for operator having more simple operations. So we wanted to assess, or we have assessed the maturity and the implementability of the standard, and whether the standard was implementation agnostic as well. It was a very important thing. Is the standard imposing a design choice, or is it somehow letting still the applicant designing its products the best way? It thinks it's following. So we have considered all those criteria in order to declare a standard fully or partially covering. We have in order to recommend or not a standard, we have not said what all needs to be filled, because it's too much. So you can see that in completeness, correctness, there's sometimes it's completely covering, sometimes it's partially covering. We have put some criteria how to recommend. This is detailed in the methodology, but basically, in order to recommend a standard, what we said is that at least the completeness needs to be C, so completely addressing or partially addressing, and the correctness should be at least rated A or I, which means applicable or intent. And for the proportionality and interoperability, there was an or in between. So we retain not systematically some standards were covering everything, but we recommended based on those criteria. And then in the final assessment of the standard, we have explained sometimes the limit of the standard, especially when the standard was only partially covering the requirement. We explain what was missing and what would need to be done by an SDO to update the standard in order to jump from partial to complete. Probably this is going to be the most interesting part for most of you, is what will be available for your review. So we started by having a view per standard. Again, we had a list of standards. We knew which requirement we wanted to assess the standard against. And I will come back on this and provide some examples, but basically for each standard, we have an Excel file providing in detail the technical assessment using the criteria I just mentioned, and a Word file which is summarizing the assessment, where it's more digestible somehow. If you are not interested to review everything in detail, I would recommend just to look at the Word file. And then we added something. I think it was not initially planned, but after we did the first package of assessment, we discussed with EASA and we decided to build a view per requirement. So it's the inverted view because, again, the starting point was we start from the standard, we assess against a specific requirement, and we say, okay, this standard can help for this requirement. But actually, sometimes we assess several standards for the same requirement, or sometimes the project did not have any standard to assess anything against a specific requirement. So we built the other view, which is if you take those 550 requirements from the SORA, use space, special position, light UAS, you will be able to see in only one Excel file which standard or which often we never, it's really rare we recommend a complete standard. Sometimes we recommend a set of sections or subsections or paragraphs, but you will be able to find in a unique place, requirement by requirement, what the Shaper project has recommended in agreement with the EASA as complete standard or partial part of the standard. And where sometimes we could not make an assessment because the standard was not available. Okay, so now you are going to be given, just for those not familiar, I don't know who has, there's a lot of people connected. As we mentioned, the first package is already available, so the people who have already reviewed the first package are probably familiar with that. I'm going just to give an overview of how the different, I don't know if you remember, I said that for each standard there is one Excel file, one Word file, so and then there's a summary file per requirement. So we are going to go on a couple of slides just to show you how it's looking like. What you need to remember is that for each standard there is one Excel file, but there is often two tabs. The reason why we had two tabs is that when we started the exercise, we actually, when we developed the methodology, what we did is that we all use the methodology on one standard to see how it was working, and we realized that just going directly in all those criteria about completeness, correctness, and so on any section of the standard was really, it was not efficient. So what we did is that we started by a high-level assessment of each standard to take section by section and say, okay, which sections are actually in scope? Because sometimes you realize that when you read a standard, there's a lot of things which have nothing to do with at least the European regulation. So sometimes it was discarded. Sometimes we as well decided to assess a standard against several requirements, and we realized that for one specific section, it was not addressing all the requirements, but only a part of it. So what we did is what you can see on this slide. So it's an example of how it's being structured. If for a standard, so I'm looking at the first table now. If for one standard, we had, I think there's 5 rows here. So it's just an example. If for one standard, we had retained 5 requirements to assess the standard against, and we were specifying as well the levels. What we did in the first tab on the section is on the Excel file is to go section by section and to say, okay, is it not applicable, or is it relevant for all the requirements or only for one of those 5 requirements? And when we decided to exclude one of the 5 requirements or more than the 5 requirements, more of one of the 5 requirements from the assessment of one specific section, in the first tab, we explain the reason why we thought that this section was not specifically addressing one specific requirement. So this was helping to simplify the detailed assessment with all those criteria, because ultimately what's the second tab, so maybe we can go to the, so the second tab looks like this everywhere. So you have the standard, you have a specific section, then a specific requirement, and then you can find the different criteria I was mentioning about completeness, correctness, proportionality, interoperability. So The detail assessment was done always at section level, and for those specific requirements, where in the high-level assessment, we said, yeah, it is relevant or not. This helps us to be more efficient and to present things in a more simplified way, because otherwise we would have had a lot of hundreds and hundreds of rules where a lot were not applicable. So this was the way we thought is the easiest to present the result. Again, it's very much into the details, but if you're interested to see the result, it's what you need to remember. The Excel file, 2 tabs, high level and detail level. And then, as I mentioned, per standard, there is a summary Word file where we re-explain what we did, which requirements were being assessed, and then there are, in each of those Word file, it's structured the same way for each requirement. There's always 2 sections which are the most interesting one, the section 3, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, section 3 is which sections are recommended against which requirement. And then the section 4 is a recommendation why we think that some sections could have been written but have not been written, and suggestions for tailoring, updating the standards, which could be looked at by SDOs to update the standard in the future. Next one. So I think that now, stay with me, we are back to giving just a real example. So what I did previously was to present you the structure of those different files. Now it's just to illustrate one example. So we took the example, this is one standard which took a lot of time. It was the most difficult standard to assess because it's a very huge standard, the F3298-19 standard from ASTM. It's a very long standard about design, construction, verification of UAS. What you can see is that this is a summary for that standard of all the special condition light UAS requirements we have assessed the standard against. So this is already the overview, and there are a bit of others requirements as well within. Next. Yeah, and then if you remember, this is a short extract of the first tab in the Excel file, the high-level overview, going section by section in the standard and saying, okay, do we make a detailed assessment for section 2.4, for instance, against those requirements? No, not relevant, because section 2.4 lists some FAA standards, so there's no, it's just reference document listed. We don't need to make a detailed assessment against this one. But for instance, on the right side of the slide, you have an example for the section 5.1, which is a proof of compliance. So among all the special condition light UAS that you could see on the previous slide, for this specific section, we have retained only 2 of the special condition light UAS, and on the right side, we have justified why all the other special condition light UAS and other requirements were not retained. So this is what you can find as an example on the first tab, again, of the Excel file of the F3298-19 standard. Then this is an example, again, on the same standard for the same section, section 5.1, of what you can find in the second tab, the detail assessment. And you remember that we only did the assessment for 2 of the special condition light UAS. So it's big files with a lot of rows. So we'll only show here an example for the special condition light UAS 2105, subparagraph A and C. And it's just showing you how everything is being presented. But in each case, we assess again using the same criteria: coverage, correctness, proportionality, and so on and so on. And based on this, for this specific example, we recommended this specific section. Yeah. Then if you don't want to go into the detail, you can always only look at the Word file. I already mentioned that Word file section 3 and 4 are the most relevant one. If you really want to see for one standard what can be used in Europe. Section 3 is listing all the recommended section. It's obviously only an extract here, again focused on the same requirements, the 2105 ANC, and as well section 4, the non-recommended sections. So now, for those who do not want to go into any of those assessments and are saying, I want to see how things are, I'm interested in one OZO, one integrity level, one specific criteria. What we build is the final table, final unique table, showing for each of those 550 plus requirements, whether we were able to recommend fully or partially a combination of standards or not. So this is the structure. Maybe we can go directly to the example after. And this will be available to all again. So this is just a short extract on OZO 5 for integrity and assurance, how we presented things. So you can see, if you are familiar with OZO 5, you will see references to UK, some very well-known UK documents, ED 279, ED 280, but as well some of the ASTM standard. You will see that we have given for some standard a partial coverage, for some other a full coverage, but we have as well in this table stated whether overall the combination of all the standards was providing a partial or full coverage. What I find interesting in this example is that ultimately for OZO 5, for the integrity, the low level of integrity, we have a complete coverage if you consider the UK ED 280 combined with 279 and the F32 9819 from ASTM. And we have explained in the comment file, and we don't need to enter this because it's not the purpose of this webinar to enter the specific details of this assessment, but I thought it's very representative of what we did, is that, okay, for one requirement, you see which standard can be used, whether those standards are partially or fully covering one thing, and if in total the combination of those standards are fully covering a requirement, with the explanation when we declare it's fully covering in total, why we think it's fully covering. Last slide. Do you want to present it? You give me an easy slide. So back to statistics, because usually people like statistics. I've already mentioned we have assessed 47 standards against more than 550 requirements. Not all of them. We have chosen with EASA which requirements were relevant. And the statistics are giving the following. So we have identified a full coverage for 19% of the requirements, a partial coverage for 28% of those requirements, and no coverage at all for 43% of the requirements. Again, keep in mind that many of the standards were published before the UAS regulation, the U-Space regulation, the special condition light UAS were published. So this is a reality, but I like to look at the glass half full. So there are things which are available. I guess EASA is going to talk about this. There is already some mock for the special condition light UAS, which has already been published by EASA, where EASA has been using the result of the ShapeUp project. So it's already helping, I hope, both the regulatory side and the industry side. And now it's up to the SDOs to take the outcome of this project and to look at where they want to focus their work for the next standard or update to the existing standard.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. Thank you very much, Marco. It was an excellent presentation of how the project actually evolved and what were the key results. You already gave actually the kind of the hook for Marco. Marco, please, what are the plans now of EASA? How can we use the results? What kind of benefits do we plan to generate?
So I want to thank Alexandra and Marco for this excellent work, and the composition of the consortium really was with high skill, and you can see from the quality of the results. So as we saw, we had a large number of standards that were developed before the regulation was published, so was developed completely independent from the regulation. Now, finally, we have this mapping. So how we are going to use all these results? First of all, I want to clarify that the operator needs to show compliance with the requirements in the regulation. Then the operator can propose all kinds of means of compliance they think that is applicable to their concept, to their operation. It's also proportionate to the way they want to conduct the operation. So they are free to find the best way to comply with the regulation. They are free to identify also the standard that is better fitting in them. But we know that sometimes it's difficult for the operator to find the right standard or the right way to comply. So EASA develop and then publish acceptable means of compliance to different elements of the regulation in order to help operators to comply. So we say that we assess a standard, we assess a methodology, and then we publish the procedures on our material, on our easy access rule. We are familiar with that. And this, when the operator is using that procedure, then it's already verified. We already know that that procedure is compliant with the regulation. But you are free to do something else, and then you need to show that it's still compliant. So this means that we do not need to have the result of Shepherd for the operator to comply with the regulation. We could already do before. Now this is a simplification for you. So what we are going to do now is to take the results of this assessment, and the results was verified already. We will discuss with the EASA expert. So we already have an agreement on this result, and we are going to develop proposal to amendment to our regulatory framework. So this means to our acceptable means of compliance and guidance material. The amendment, the proposal is called NPA, Notice of Proposed Amendment, is our normal rulemaking process, where we will identify, based on the assessment of Shepherd, that in order to comply with requirement X, you can use standard Y, or you can use a combination of multiple standards, as was shown by Alexandra in the slide before the last. So that then you can use it to show compliance with the requirements. So we plan to develop this notice of proposed amendment in the first quarter of next year. And this then will have a normal consultation. You will still will be able to provide your comment. And then we will review the comments, and we will publish a final decision with amending then finally the MC AGM 1 year later, more or less. Then depends also on how many comments we will have. So with this will be the first way we are going to implement the results. But there will be other ways. For example, for when we talk about pure design-related standard, then you know that we have already application for verification of some design of some project through design verification report, for which we use as requirements those coming from the light UAS, the special condition light UAS. And so also in that case, when applicant comes to EASA, they can propose all kinds of means of compliance to show that their project comply with the elements of the special condition. But we know that also in that case, we want to help. So you may be aware that we already published 2 means of compliance that were resulting from the first deliverable of Shepherd, and then the means of compliance on 2405, like lift thrust power system integrity, and 2410 lift thrust power system endurance and durability. And now we are planning to publish a new one. We plan in a few months on the means of compliance 2575 command control and communication contingency publication. Now we heard that there are still several gaps, and actually when the regulation was published, we were let's say, hoping that more standards could be developed by industry, but this was not the case. And so EASA also decided to publish and to develop by itself some other means of compliance. For example, I think that now we are all familiar with the containment requirements, means of compliance 2510, that then was completely developed by EASA. So our aim is to provide all facilitation as we can in order to support your application, either for an assessment of the SORA or for showing compliance with the elements of the design. And then the last element of the regulation is the use space. So some standards were dedicated to the service that use space service provider may provide. So also in this case, we are going to develop a proposal to amend the MCAGM to the regulation on the use space. So here on use space, you know, that became applicable last year. So then there are several discussions also with the potential use space service provider that are now finalizing their structure in different states. So there will be an iterative process also to discuss with those based on the lesson learned that we are receiving from them. But still, we plan to publish a proposal in a few months from now. And also in this case, there will be a decision plan 1 year later. Since the use space is quite new, they may need some reassessment based on what we'll see from the field when we are going to discuss with the use space service provider. But also in this field, this assessment will be very helpful. And then one of also more very important topic will be once that now we know what are the standards that may be applicable to different requirements in the regulation. First of all, we are through the USCG, we are going to update the rollout development plan. So this list of standards where we are going to link requirements to standard. In this way, we will identify better what are the gaps. So what are those requirements for which there is no standard, or those requirements for which the standard is only covering partially the requirements. Then there is some additional work that the operator needs to do, some approach that they need to develop by themselves because the standard is not helping completely. So within the European Standardization Coordination Group, there will be then the discussion with the whole standardization body, and one of the deliverables from Shepherd was to describe what is missing on a standard that is partially compliant in order to become fully compliant with one element of the regulation. So this assessment will be offered to the standardization body in order to let them evaluate if they want to improve the standard in order to make it fully applicable. So at the end, the aim will be to identify for all requirements one or even more acceptable standards that may support you. So it still will take some time to have a full coverage, but as we said, so these are not essential. You can still today propose any other methodology to show compliance with the regulation, but this is just a simplification that we offer to all of you. So this is the end of our presentation. This is also how we are going to use these results. So now we are ready to answer to questions. I think there are some questions on the slide, correct?
Yes,
Very good
exactly.
questions.
Perhaps we go to the next slide. And thank you very much, Natalia, for your explanations, also how EASA will use these quite important results of this project. So colleagues, please kindly, once more, for those who came a bit later, we will use Slido in order to collect your questions, comments you may have. For the time being, I see that we have 20 questions. And what I will do is I will just read out the question. I will also highlight it so that you see on which questions we are currently talking. And then I kindly ask my colleagues then to answer to this question. So let me go back here to Slido. The first one, which is here on my list, because it received a lot of
it's a very good question. We did not clarify this. So thanks for raising the question.
Maybe I read it out because I don't know if everyone sees it.
Sorry,
The question is this assessment made on SORA 0.2 or SORA 2.5 consultation? Please answer.
Sorry, I thought everybody... So I hope in the WebEx you can press on the S. I didn't know it, so I prefer to explain it to everyone. Press on the S in order to see the list of questions. If people are connected, they can see the list of questions. What we did is that we have used SORA 2.5 in order that this is usable. We expect EASA to most probably recognize SORA 2.5 as soon as it's being published by JERUS. Most of the company involved in Shepherd are as well supporting JERUS, so we decided to use the text of 2.5 and even make some updates because the 2.5 text was evolving. But yeah, you will find it, and very often we have copied and pasted the wording of the SORA 2.5. I remember especially for Annex B, M2 mitigation, because not everyone is having the draft, so we thought that it's the best. So 2.5 with an extract for those people who have not yet access to the text in order that you understand which specific requirement we have used.
But we don't expect big changes between 2.0 and 2.5 in terms of requirements. So we may expect that maybe we just be in a realignment, but those assessments will be valid for both 2.0 and 2.5.
Yes, it's just that I think that sometimes it's more what the main difference between 2.0 and 2.5 on those requirements are often clarification. So I think it was even for us easier to use 2.5 because at least there was less potential for misinterpretation. So we thought that using the 2.5 wording will help ultimately, and at least the assessment would be more consistent. So yeah, agreed.
Thank you. Any further comments? No, good. Then let's mark this question as done. I come to the next one, and that's from Zach. What will happen with the around 43% that are not currently met?
I think it is 43% of requirements or that are not put in the map. So as I said before, standards are not essential. You can still show compliance with the best approach that you think fits your need. But you need to show to the competent authority that you are compliant with the requirements that is in the regulation. We still will work with standardization bodies. We are in contact through the European Standardization Coordination Group, and so I'm the chairman of this group, to coordinate the development of the new standards. We are in close contact with Alessandra. She's the chairman of the Eurokai, the group that is working on standard for drones. Similarly, we are in close contact with the other chairman from STM, from SD-STAN, from ISO. So in order to help them to quickly develop the missing standard. And then when we will receive also an application for a design verification, we will also develop from the experience that we receive from them additional means of compliance. So this is the way we are going to cover this 43%.
Good. Thank you very much. I close this as marked. Filippo. And first of all, greetings from here, Filippo. Filippo is a former colleague of mine. I'm happy to see that you also are attending this meeting. So the question of Filippo is how and when EASA plans to publish the list of standards positively assessed by the project.
Maybe you know better. And
yeah, so it is planned that we do this as quickly as possible. We are finalizing basically today. And we hope that we will publish this by the end of this week, if not earlier. Fine, then let's move on to the next question, which is also from Filippo. How will EASA inform the concerned STO that the standard needs improvement before it could be accepted by the agency?
Yeah, so as I said, now the outcome of the study will be offered to all the standardization body, so they will know what is the assessment, where are the area that they need to work in order to improve the standard to make it then acceptable to us. We are then participating to all this body with them. So they also through ESG. So there are several ways that we are informing them on what is needed.
Thank you. Let's move on to the next question, which is from Peter. How did you determine whether a regulatory requirement actually requires a published standard?
So, in reality, as I said, there is no regulatory requirements that require a published standard. Everybody is able to show compliance in the best way they think is appropriate for their operation. The standard is a way to help operator to comply. Now, when the requirement is quite complicated, so when, for example, if we need to have an analysis of the failure mode of a product of an aircraft, then in order to do it properly, you need to refer to a standard to show that everything was properly taught. So when the requirements is complicated, then having a standard surely will simplify the dialogue between the operator and the assessor, so the assessor from the authority on the other side.
And if I may complement your answer, I think that it's mostly, if you look at the SORA Annex E in particular, in the operational safety objectives, in some cases, it's clearly stated something needs to be done, developed to a standard considered adequate by the authority and or means of compliance acceptable to that authority. It's for those cases where, as you mentioned, which request a little bit more structured approach. For those cases where the reference to a standard considered adequate or means of compliance considered adequate, we have considered that the standard is not absolutely a must and not everything needs to be standardized. But so the distinction we did in Shepherd between those requirements requesting a standard or not refer to this explicit mention of the need to have use a means of compliance published by the authority or a standard accepted by the authority.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, just one last word on this topic. There are also requirements for example, in the special conditional light UAS, like the first requirement of a subsection, which in the end it's not really a requirement. It's more like saying what's the scope of the entire section. So those requirements, of course, cannot be mapped with any standard.
Good. Thank you very much, colleagues. I mark this question as closed. The next one is from Mario. Does showing compliance to now identified applicable standards replace the DVR process? If yes, where?
So the design verification process is a process in which EASA assess that a drone in this case is compliant with a set of requirements that are defined in the special condition like UAS. So as I said, then it's the operator, it's the applicant, in this case the manufacturer, that needs to show compliance. And the compliance may be showed to evidence that some standards are applied. So it's not there is no now alternative process to design verification report. It's just that now the manufacturer knows better what is the expectation from EASA when you are going to apply. So you know that if you are developing one of the requirements using a standard, then this standard will be considered adequate by EASA. So still you need to show that you properly designed according to the standard and you have all the evidence.
Thank you. Let's move on to the next question from Samo. Interesting one as well. Will the standards be available free of charge to operators if they are part of an EU legislation, of the EU legislation 219/947?
Yeah, so the standards are not part of the regulation because we said that the regulation identify what are the requirements. Then we say that if you are using one standard, then you are compliant with the regulation. So standards then are developed by the standardization body that are commercial entities. So there is also an effort that needs to be repaid from them. So this means that it will be up to the operator to buy the standard and then make sure that you are compliant, but will not be part of will not be provided free of charge because it's not part of the regulation. It's just one possible way to comply with the regulation.
Thank you, Natale. Let's move on to the next question from Rebecca. Isn't the spirit of SORA not to be prescriptive? If you include this as an EMC, you are kind of forcing operators to comply with Shepherd standards as a soft law.
Now, yeah, this is an interesting question because we received different feedback. So in some cases, we want to go to a full performance-based regulation, where the regulation only defines what is the performance that we want to reach, but we don't want to prescribe how the operator needs to reach that performance. And this is fine because then you may use different approach, different technology. But we see that especially when we have a small operator, then it can be a bit difficult for the operator to identify how they can comply with the regulation. So, as I said before, when we publish an acceptable means of compliance, it's not the acceptable means of compliance, it's one acceptable means of compliance. So you have two approaches. You can use what is written in our MC, and then this should provide you a quicker way to show compliance, because then you don't need to demonstrate to the competent authority that your approach is compliant with the regulation, because this was already done through our rulemaking process. Or you may define something because maybe it's smarter for your needs, because you are using a new technology and you want to do something completely different. You are free to use it, but naturally you need to show to the competent authority that your approach is meeting the requirements in the regulation. So this is the way it will be used. So still, SORA will remain performance-based. This is a domain where the technology is evolving every day. So we cannot afford that we will say that you need to comply with the regulation only in this way. We just are offering alternatives, and when tomorrow we will receive a proposal using a different technology, we will publish a second acceptable means of compliance on the same topic, a third one, and whatever. So this you should see this publication only as something to facilitate your compliance, your demonstration of compliance to the authority.
Thank you very much. Any further comment to that? No, then I'm answered as completed. So let's come to the question of Eric, I think from Taiwan. how will the SDO be expected to respond and undertake the necessary revision in order to formulate the complete standards acceptable to the agency? I think it's also up to you again.
Maybe I start, then I will leave it to Alexandra, but she's representing one of the SDO. So SDO, they are independent organizations, so they are not working for EASA, and even if we have a very strong collaboration with them, they have all the interest to have the standard recognized by EASA. So in this way, then the applicant may make use of the standard. So as I said, we have several forums in which we have exchange with all SDO, not only in Europe, but also those mostly in the United States. So we are just offering them this possibility, and we think that they will have all the interest to have their standard recognized, such that then you can use in a simpler way. I don't know if Alexandra, from
no, I fully agree. It's something I'm saying as co-chair of UK 105. I'm always saying, a standard is only good if EASA is recognizing it. So it's something we strongly discuss when the process is that in order to have a new activity in UK, members have to make a proposal. But of course, the leadership and the TAC members are reviewing those proposals, and we always try to make sure that the proposal is going to help the industry and is as well aligned with the European regulation. So not everything is going to be fixed in 6 months, because it's a lot of work, and it's based on it's on voluntary basis. The industry is not being paid by UK to do that work. It's they are using it's voluntary, but yeah, it's really something we are, at least in UK, but I know that it's the same in STM, that we are very careful to make sure that any standard is being. I mean, it's great when when the standard is being recognized by EASA. It brings a lot of value to the standard. So it's obviously something we are very, at leadership level in the SDOs, that we are very careful about.
Thank you. Let's move on to the next question, which is from Zarunas. Are there any plans to later to publish a live list of UAS meeting these standards on the EASA website? So I understand if there will be an always up-to-date list of standards which are meeting US requirements.
So this list will be published on the EUSEG website, where we have this rollover development plan that will link the requirements to the acceptable standard. So this will be a quick list. Then then we will go to the EASA Easy Access Rule. So Easy Access Rule, for those that are less familiar, is a document published by EASA, where we have the regulation 945 and 947, and all acceptance of compliance and guidance material. So for each element of the regulation, there is normally one or more AMC, and when there is a standard acceptable, then it's written that for that elements of the regulation, standard XYZ is an acceptance of compliance. So this is the main reference. Then the summary with the list will be published on the rollover development plan of the EUSEG.
I'm not sure we have answered the question, but
because
the question is about UAS, so the drones meeting the standards. I think you're not going to do that.
Those drones that are complying with the standard.
But you are publishing the DVRs, no?
Yeah.
When a DVR is being
So here,
rented to.
Thank you for.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought that we're still talking about standard. I said you may be aware that EASA is working on a new platform. It's called the Innovative Air Mobility Hub. It's already available on the EASA website. Since a couple of months, you may have noticed that there was a change in the layout of the first page of the EASA website related to drones. And this first page is because now we have this hub, and one of the elements of this platform is the drone design database that we are still populating. So in this drone design database, already today we have all drones that has been shown compliance with design verification report, either the full drones or only for some function like containment or M2 mitigation. We are now filling with those drones that have a class mark from C0 to C6. And in the future, we will also find a way to show those drones that are compliant with the other standard, even if they are in sale between 1 and 4, maybe also tomorrow when they will have type certificate in sale 5 and 6. So all this information will be in this single database where you can find all drones that are compliant, that are compliant with. So it's been acceptable to be allowed to operate in Europe in some condition by some authorities. This is our goal.
Thank you. Anything to add, Alexandra? No.
No.
Good. Then we move forward to a comment from Annelies. Unclear at this stage whether the proposal and cost of compliances are proportionate to the risk. What was the feedback from manufacturers and operators in your stakeholders' engagement?
Yeah, I can try to answer this. So Alexandra presented that in our methodology we had one criterion on proportionality, and that was supposed to exactly assess this issue. Of course, the assessment of proportionality cannot be really separated from the assessment of the maturity of the standard, because if nobody has actually used that standard, of course, the proportionality is just based on an expert judgment. We did have manufacturers and operators within our team of experts and as part of the stakeholders. So our assessment was confirmed by all the people involved. So at this stage, it's the best thing we can do is to, let's say, stand by the assessment we made in terms of proportionality of the standard to the risk. And this is, I would say, fully applicable for those standards that are already mature. For those that are not, I would say that only experience will tell. And at the moment, what you can find in the assessment is the expert judgment of manufacturers and operators.
I think one of the most famous examples is a DO-178 for software development. It's something we have, although we know the value of this standard, we have not recommended for application below cell 5, I think. We have highly recommended not to use this. And standardization activity, SDOs are already working at alternative to the DO-178, which could be more usable by smaller organization, because we all know that applying DO-178 is having huge cost on organization. So this is a typical example, and this is one of where we say, okay, really great standards, but we do not recommend it for our application.
Thank you. We move on to a question from Alex. What was the process used, open application or just known parties, to select those initial participating companies mentioned at the start of the webinar?
Maybe so for you.
So I tried to say actually at the beginning, probably not. I know that not all of you were there. At the EASA, or the process is as follows. The European Union added certain action to the work program of Horizon Europe. And there is the requirement for EASA that we are the contractor, the authority for contractors, as well as that we provide guidance on the technical content. But we are asked to do an open tender in order to select the best candidate for implementing such a project. And that we do for all these 37 projects we currently have in our portfolio. So this means for this project, it was done as it is done for any other project. There was a public tender, which was open not only to European Union operators, but also to organizations outside of Europe. And as said, it was, I can also tell you, it was a very competitive tender. And in the end, Deep Blue leading this consortium was found to be the best one. Anything to add from colleagues? Good. Then let's please move on to the next question, which is from Muid. How mature are the standards and recommendations referred in AW drone study to be used in the design verification of UAS, SC, LUS?
Yeah, I think I can answer that. So AW drones results are, I would say, outdated now because that project did not provide any technical assessment of the standards. So you should now look at the results of the Shepherd project. Those results represent the assessment of the Shepherd consortium. They do not necessarily represent the EASA position unless they are, let's say, endorsed through an official means of compliance. But still, I would say they are a very, very good starting point because, I mean, all the results were reviewed with EASA experts. So, I mean, I would say it's a very good starting point.
Thank you. Then we move on to the next question. Okay, the standards are there. As a drone manufacturer or operator, how can I justify that I have correctly applied the requirements or technical elements described in a given standard?
So here, that's according to SORA, there is the concept of a level of robustness. So depending on the level of risk on the sale of the operation, in some cases it is required that the applicant, that can be a manufacturer or can be an operator, just may declare compliance if the level of robustness is low. If it's medium, they need to provide some evidence. If instead it's high, then they need to have a third-party verification. So what we expect is that when you are using a standard and you are following it and you are putting the best effort to comply with it. So if the risk is low, so we think a declaration as a written in SORA is okay. There will be no immediate verification. However, you as an applicant, you will be undergo the oversight from the competent authority that gives you the authorization, or if in case of design from EASA. In that case, you then you will receive potentially an inspection from the competent authority that will verify that what you declared then is correct. If you said so, then the level of robustness is high, then you immediately will be required by the competent authority to provide evidence, and they will verify that you are compliant. So this is the way it will be verified. Yeah.
Thank you. Next question from Rebecca. Do you believe the difficulty of these standards is adequate for common US operators? Kind of a coaching question.
Yeah, I think this is similar to the previous question. So I would say that we assess the proportionality, and whenever we are recommending a standard, it means that it's proportionate. So the difficulty is adequate.
I will say that, I mean, probably Rebecca has some specific examples in mind where maybe she's having difficulties. I would say let's engage in SDOs to address those issues. I mean, it's the best place to be. The industry needs to engage in ERK and ASTM in order to get the best standards as well. But when the consortium was pretty diverse, actually, I think we did a good exercise at selecting. There was research small, a bit bigger, and so I think that when we were recommending a standard, it's usable. Now, if there are specific cases, again, it's easy for me as UK Working Group 105 chair. I mean, if there are difficulties, please contact me. I can put you in contact with the STM as well on some standards. I mean, I think the best way to provide another view on if there are some difficulties is to address those difficulties in the standardization bodies.
Thank you. Alexandra. Let's move on to the next question from George.
Already.
Are all of the approved standards available to the public regardless of the price?
So I think we already answered to this question before. Just maybe I want to mention just the second time it's coming the same question. Maybe some of you are more used to the market regulation. You know that when we have a C marking, a class mark, then there is a standard that is developed by SENS and SENELEC, and this standard become an harmonized norm. And you are obliged to use that standard when you want to declare compliance with the regulation. This is not the case in aviation. So there is no mandatory standard. So this is why we cannot provide the standard free of charge. So you need to buy the standard from the standardization body that developed it.
Yeah, maybe just to complement and to clarify, all the standards we have assessed are published and are available at the price, but yeah, they are available.
And I think this was the initial question of George, actually. He was not complaining about the price. He was asking whether all the standards are
available.
Yes. And it's exactly what but we can repeat because, I mean, if people have questions, maybe we're not super clear always, or we need to repeat. So the 47 retained standards are all publicly available published standards. This was very important for us, not to start making proposal on something which is not available to the public. So the answer to your question, George, is yes.
Good, thank you. Another question from Samo. How will EASA be able to change the standard, which will be part of the legislation for UAS, if a change is necessary? For example, the solution is not suitable or there are safety issues.
So it's not EASA that is going to change the standard. So it's the standardization body that they will decide if they want to change the standard. So as we said before, so we can only recognize the standard, so including our certificates of compliance, if we believe that the standard is fully compliant, or maybe we can say that only one part of the standard may be used, the other part may not be used, so we can do also this kind of trick. Then, if the standardization body, they would like to make the standard more usable by their applicant, so they can decide to modify them and make it fully compliant with the regulation. But it's not EASA that can do it. It's up to them to decide.
Thank you. Natalia, let's move on to the next question, which is also from Samo, critical as well. By how much will be the number of pages to be increased by applying standards for most operators already excessive legislation for a specific category? So, the question is by how many pages, numbers of pages we could expect here increases?
I think it's very difficult to answer this
question. Well, I think it's, again, a matter of proportionality. So I think the number of pages will increase proportionally with the level of risk and the need to demonstrate compliance of the procedures, of the design and everything.
And a good example is usually the RTCA standards, which are famously very long standards, sometimes above 1,000 pages. It's usually not something recommended for Cell 1 or 2 operations. Yeah. I'm thinking about the detect and avoid standards, which are recommended. RTCA detect and avoid standards, which are recommended. It's usually for ARC-D, for the TNPR to meet the TNPR for ARC-D, and this is mostly flying in integrated airspace. It's not for most of the operators. So I will say, yeah, the number of pages should be proportionate to the risk of the operation. And the other thing is, again, the Shaper project has not recommended a complete standard or not. I mean, initially, I think the way the project was settled, the idea was to say, okay, which standard can be recommended, which cannot be recommended. We ended up with sometimes just recommending a couple of sections in a standard. So again,
yeah, so maybe just to complement for operations classified SAIL 1 and 2, I would say that the number of pages will likely not increase at all because most of the requirements at that level do not require a standard. The special condition light UAS is not necessarily applicable, so no increase. Then SAIL 3 and 4, yeah, we may have a slight increase, but it should be helpful in finding the best way to comply with the existing requirements. And then SAIL 5 and 6, yes, there is an increase, but we are talking about certified UAS then. So it's, I think, normal that there is an increase of pages.
Yeah. Fine, thank you. Let's move on to a question from Amandine. Table 1 currently published on the other website is empty. When will the final document be published?
Friday. Table 1 is the table.
But it's not empty, I think, Amandine. It is the first worksheet, which contains a preliminary assessment. I think this is empty, but you will see there are so many different worksheets in these tables, which are all populated. But despite that, I just confirm once more, an updated table will be available probably by end of this week or earlier.
Yeah.
Then a question which is anonymous, interesting because I wanted to disable it, but no, it's a good question. Huh? Is it also possible to use alternative means of compliances for the open category marking, such as C0, C1, and for the specific categories such as C5 and C6?
Yeah, so this is what I mentioned before regarding the market regulation. So when the open category and the standard scenario, so C5 and C6 specific category, so it's the standard scenario, were developed, it was decided to find the balance between flexibility and simplicity, because when you are flexible, then it may be needed to have an assessment by the competent authority. And then this means that it will be a little bit more complicated to get an authorization. So it was decided for the open category, a standard scenario, the regulation should be written such that no assessment was required by the competent authority, but this came with some cost that we could not be so much performance-based. So standard scenario and open category, in reality, they are prescriptive. So this is why we only require that you use a drone that is with a class mark, C0 to C6. You can also use a privately built drone, but we consider this will be only done in very limited cases. So most of the time is a drone with a class mark. And class mark is not so under the aviation regulation, what we call the basic regulation, but is under the market regulation that in reality is not flexible. So we have only one standard that will needs to be published, the final version, that will be the harmonized European norm, and is the 4709. Then there is a series, there are 6 standards under the series of 4709, and those are the only standard that can be used. So while for the open category standard scenario, we are flexible, that is the only standard. For the specific category, so when you are applying for the authorization under SORA, when you are showing compliance and special condition at UAS, or for the use space, then the system is different. So then we can have alternative means of compliance.
Thank you. Let's move on to a question from Francois. What do you mean when you evaluate interoperability? I think it was used before, with respect to FAA expectations or other regulations or standards or other equipment such as aircraft ground equipment or ATM. Alexander, please.
Apparently it's for me. No, but this one is easy. Yeah, it's the last one. We were using interoperability. First of all, it's not always applicable, but when, for instance, there is a need to exchange information between systems, we evaluated whether, for instance, if a standard relies on API in order to simplify the interfaces between different software applications, this is interoperable. it's mostly in line with use-based regulation when several standards can happen because USSP needs to talk to each other, for instance. So to answer your question, it's I'm coming back to your question. Yeah, it was not related to compatibility with the FAA regulation, which is not yet published. We are all waiting for the NPRM this summer, or regulation and so that. No, it was related to other equipment and especially the exchange of information.
Thank you. During the preparation and finalizing of accepted standards, were civil aviation authorities involved or going to be involved?
So maybe let's hear maybe the question. Let's start during the development of standard. As we said, the standard are developed by the standardization body, and there are meetings with different stakeholders and also authorities. Sometimes they are able to participate, so they are invited. Authorities, EASA, and depending on the resources, they participate. So, but I don't know if then the question here is more on the development of standard or the recognition of the standard as acceptable means of compliance. So, development of standard, as we said, is up to the authority, is up to the standardization body, and the authority may support, may provide their view, but doesn't have any power to drive how the standard is developed. Regarding instead the recognition of the standard, the assessment. Normally, so we use our rulemaking process. The rulemaking process then identified that in some cases we have also a rulemaking group, so we consult different bodies. And for drones, since now 2 years, we established a technical advisory body that is made of aviation authority from all over Europe, so from all the EASA member states. So within this body, we have also some task forces that are trying to address how to develop means of compliance, or in some cases also to assess standard from different requirements. For example, we have one dedicated to the airworthiness, one dedicated to the requirements from the LUC, like a man certificate, and so on. So in this way, the aviation authority are involved to provide some proposal. Then we always have the coordination in plenary with all the aviation authorities. So this is the way where we involve the authority from the assessment point of view when we develop a proposal for an acceptable means of compliance.
Thank you. Moving on to the next question, which is an anonymous one as well. Is the design assurance level fixed for the specific assurance and integrity level 3 and 4 by the standard, considering that it is a driving factor for the US design development?
Yeah, I will leave the answer to Alexandra. I don't think the design assurance level is fixed in any standard.
No.
Yeah, exactly. It's no.
It was not at my time at EASA, and it's still not the case. So the DAL levels are always fixed by the regulator. Then what the standards are doing is, for a given DAL, the development assurance level, so the standard can give guidance how to meet that level, but the DALs are not fixed by the standard. It's always fixed by regulators. It didn't change, Antonio. It's still the case. Okay.
Good. Anything to add? No? Thank you. Then, Peter, we have still 3 questions open, and I think we are really fine at the time. Peter, so just to be clear, the rulemaking task 0730 will only supplement AMC GM by pointing to existing standards, ?
Okay, so we are in a phase where now we have 3 years of almost 3 years of experience on the drone regulation. So we are receiving a lot of feedback from authorities, from operator, from manufacturers. So we are in a phase where we would like to make some improvement to all the setting. So no change, because we think that the way not change in the concept, because we think that the way the regulation is developed is fine. We just want to maybe include some clarification, add other kind of means of compliance, and also we will also provide some proposal next year on improvement on the regulation, but only to better clarify some elements so that today already applied, but we had in some cases the way that the regulation is worded is a little bit confused. So our rulemaking task will identify what are the input that we will receive from different stakeholders on how to improve the different elements of the regulation. So this will include the standards that are proposed by Shepherd, but potentially also something more, but will be then consulted. So you will have the possibility to provide your view, and we are going to provide also a written answer to all of your comments. So the answer is that there will be a little bit more. So we will not be only pointing to the standards as are defined by Shepherd. We will maybe something additional standard may come out that maybe we may consider applicable between now and when the proposal will be out. But so we are here trying to find a way to simplify the understanding of the regulation by all the applicants.
Thank you very much, Natale. And a follow-up question from Peter. So will USCG discuss and decide which standards need to be enhanced and added, and which SDO will do the work?
So which standard needs to be enhanced? It's already defined by now the report from AW Drones. So if Shepherd, sorry, Shepherd. Thank you for the correction. And then it will be evident when we are publish a certain means of compliance where we are only recognize some standards. So there will be evident that the other standards are not accepted by EASA. So the AUSCG doesn't have any power to task any standardization body. But it was so far very useful, first of all, to coordinate among standardization body, to inform of the status of this assessment that was done by EASA, in some cases, by Shepherd now. Also, we have operators in our on the table, right around the table, that identify also what are the priorities. For example, the reason why we decided in EASA to develop the means of compliance on the containment 2511 by ourselves is because we had a clear requirement from the operator that that was needed in order to start operation in Europe. So the USCG is a place where we try to avoid that are duplications. So first of all, we identify what are the gaps, and we try to see which should be the standardization body that best fit to fill that gap and avoid that multiple body will do the same thing. But then will be always up to them to decide to invest on the developments on standard to fill that gap.
Thank you very much, Natale. We have still two questions, and then there's a third one, which I hold back for the time being. And I will not, colleagues, I will not accept any further questions then thereafter. So a question from Rebecca. Did you assess the 550 identified requirements?
You want to
Yeah.
take it? No.
So yeah, no, exactly, because we assess the standards. So the starting point for us were always the standards. Then we map the standards with the requirements. So as an end result, you also have a table with the list of requirements, and you can check which of them are covered and which are not. So it's a kind of result that you have anyways, but the starting point were the standards, not the requirements.
And I think we have revised several times the wording in order not to mislead people reading this table. When none of the standard we assessed was covering one of the requirements, we didn't say that there is no standard which possibly can be used to answer one specific requirement. I don't know the wording, I'm improvising, but we really clarified that none of the standards assessed in the scope of the Shepherd project was answering this requirement, because there may be others that we may have missed something in the scope, but it's so we have not assessed the requirement. We have assessed standard, the 47 standards.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. We received questions. So I said we will not accept one. I accepted still some.
Okay.
And there is a voting up of some questions. So I take this one now. Yes.
So which one do we do now?
So we take this one, which I highlighted. Will the results of Shepherd be updated with new standards with a similar approach as the current one when those are published? I think we had a similar question already.
Yeah, but so the answer is no. We don't think at this moment we see the need, because Shepherd was useful for us to navigate, and now that we are at the beginning where we had a number of standards that were not developed for the regulation because they were developed, most of them, before the regulation. So now that we are aligned and we know what are those standards, how this standard may be related to the elements of the regulation, then we are going to use our normal approach. So, as you said, we are normally involved in the different standardization body and to identify the development of standards. So we already know how these may or may not comply with the elements of the regulation. So we will then, when a new standard will be published, we are going to assess either within an application, because maybe an operator wants to use the standard, or maybe because we have the possibility to assess also outside of it. And then we are going to publish as an acceptable means of compliance in our regulation.
Thank you very much. Next question. Will there be any suggestions of specific standards for mandatory use-based services and various optional services for use-based in the upcoming EASA EMC and GM?
Yeah, so as I said, there will be an MPA, so in order to propose assessment amendment to the acceptance of compliance and guidance material to the use space that is planned for mid of this year. And so this will include also...
No mid of this year, next year.
Mid of next year, so sorry, so mid of next year. I thought you okay. So for mid of next year...
We didn't publish even the terms of reference, and we still...
Okay.
So next year.
Okay, so for mid of next year, so sorry for the confusion. I have here our program manager, Maria, that she's
we want it mid of this year, but logistically it's not possible. It's going to be mid of next year.
So, and this will include also the acceptance of compliance, so the provisional standard for the use space.
Good, thank you. Another quite interesting question. Where and when can the Excel file and Word files described here found?
End of the week.
End of the week. Is it publicly reusable? I mean, can I put it on an online wiki in a more user-friendly interface, and then Word and Excel? Of course, the author's Shepherd will be cited. So maybe I can say something to that. It's public money which allowed to do this research work. It's of course publicly available. You can use this freely, and that's actually the sense why we all did this, that it is used. So please go ahead with that, and thank you very much for citing Shepherd, that it was funded by the European Union, and perhaps you also mentioned EASA. Thank you for that. Then the next question of François. How to apply to participate to expertise works for EU SCG?
Okay. So in the EU SCG, we have all the relevant organizations that are working on drone from the institution point of view, from a standardization body, and from the user. And we work with those associations that are working at European level. If you are part of one of the European association, then you can join the USCG through them. For example, we have the association, we have JEDA, we have Alliance for New Mobility Europe, we have Drone Alliance Europe, we have GUTMA, and we have ISD. So if you are one of these member of this association, then you can join. But as you can imagine, we cannot have a single operator then would be difficult to manage. So you need to make sure that he's in a size that is manageable. So please contact this, or maybe also then we have also the standardization body. If you're part of the standardization body, you can join, but it's not open to single entities.
Thank you very much. And now, colleagues, I think we come really to the last comments which we received, and that is from Filippo. Thank you very much, Filippo. He says, congratulations to the initiative to my friends Alex, Willy, Natalia, and Marco. Thank you very much to you back, Filippo, for all the work also you have done when you still were at the EASA. And with that, colleagues, we have gone through our questions and answers part. Maybe we move 2 slides down. We come to the concluding remarks. Before we conclude, colleagues, perhaps let's go to the, thank you. I already mentioned we have a number of research projects. Quite a lot of them actually are closing. One of them was now the Shepherd project. We have currently today a 2 days conference on a completely different subject. It's on health and on medical subjects. It deals with mental health of pilots and ATCOs. I think this was also a great project, which is finishing now. We have another one on Thursday, which is closing. That's the helicopter underwater escape project, which was a fantastic project as well, because they made actually trials how you can escape from a helicopter underwater, what kind of forces you need, how much time you need to do this, and what does it actually mean for the individual who are in such a situation. We will learn we gain a lot of information from these projects in order to improve our rules, improve our certifications and our oversight activities, not only for us, but actually for all authorities. Having said that, there's another slide which I use, if I may. We have a so-called Aviation Authorities Research Agenda, and that's outlining, it's a prioritized list of those topics where we believe that authorities should continue its work to make sure that we have also in the future a safe, secure and healthy ecosystem. I say authorities research agenda because it's not only EASA, it has been created together with member states, with the national aviation authorities from the European Union. And you see here, they are it's quite broad as well. We have environmental topics like, for example, the production of new SAF production pathways. It's dealing again with artificial intelligence. We have currently a project which is also closing. We will have another one, we hope so, which is focusing on human factors. Security, which is impacting safety, is always an important aspect for any authority. Here we have outlined 2 topics. One, using artificial intelligence aspects in order to improve security, and the other one to come forward with a common methodology for operators to assess the risk of conflict zones. Then we have again health and medical topics. One is dealing with the obstructive sleep apnea, and the other one, what does it mean if you have high airspace operations? What does it mean for the flight crew, but also for passengers? Then on automation, which certainly will come. What does mean a further automation on the role of a pilot or of an air traffic controller? So what does it mean for their job, but also there are legal applications to that. For example, who actually in the end takes the responsibility? Who takes over the pilot of command responsibility as an example? On air operations, we singled out a project dealing with flight time limitations for enhanced minimum crew operations. In the ATM ANS fields, there is one project in order to ensure that we can effectively certify ground equipment, and another one would deal with airspace classifications on the upper airspace in order to see if we can further harmonize this. Another one on drones, and here focusing on the VLOS operations, sea in the void and so forth. And last but not least, data for safety, dealing with or looking for specific use cases in order to use big data for enhancing safety. So that's just a snapshot. With that, colleagues, I would like, first of all, thank the great presentations and answers provided by Alex, by my colleague Natalia, and by Marco. Thank you so much. Then I would like to thank very much, actually, Deep Blue and the whole consortium. As Natalia already mentioned, you have done a great job. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And I would like to thank also Natalia, and there's a huge team also behind Natalia, who worked with Natalia and who had a full support also from Maria as program manager. So thank you also for you. You have spent a lot of efforts in order to make this project a success together with Marco and Alex. And my last thing is on you, colleagues. Thank you very much for joining our webinar. For all those questions, I think I recorded around 30 questions, which is a lot. We had at a certain time, now we have 120, but we had almost 300 participants. It's really great. Thank you very much. You will have the recorded webinar, as well as the presentations and all the project documents available, I think, by Friday. Please be so kind and share this also with your colleagues, with others. And having said that, I thank you once more, and we are closing now. Have a good day. Bye-bye.